This one, front foot strike, checkpoint 4, one of our in our system. This one is probably, if I had to pick one and I could only see one thing, I want to see this. This tells me at front foot strike, where's everything at? So number one, when we talk about front foot strike, how should the foot strike? Again, options. We want the athlete to move how their body allows them to move within the context of high-level throwing system. So we don't care if they're slightly heel first. We don't care if they're ball of foot. What we generally don't like is we don't like toe landers and we don't like insteppers for the most part. Especially at the lower levels, like the 12, 13, 14s, anytime someone ends up landing instep, they almost never have enough hips to get all the way around. They almost always end up throwing and kicking off to the side, and it's just not a very efficient move. So one of the things that we're really looking for here, there's a couple key points that we're looking for at the front foot strike. Obviously, hip to shoulder separation. Important to note that we never cue this. Like, we never tell an athlete, hey, could you go ahead and hold your hip to shoulder separation a little bit longer in your delivery? No, that's not it. So for what we tell guys is, number one, we'll talk about it later, do they even have the ability to separate their hips? But one of the cues we'll talk about is, hey, make sure your chest is facing center field as long as you can, or hide your shoulder as long as you can. And so at front foot strike, if their chest is still facing center field, we know that they have a pretty fair amount of hip to shoulder separation. Again, something at the younger levels, they probably don't have enough core strength and anti-rotation strength to be able to hold that. The other thing we talk about is abduction and horizontal abduction. We don't call it that. Abduction, abduction would be this, 90 degrees. Horizontal abduction would be back here. Some people call it scapulode. One of the things we're looking at is, is the center fielder, could he still see your chest? Number two, where are you at in terms of your flip up? So we want to make sure, and I would say probably one of the most common flaws that we see, especially with youth athletes, is the timing of where their hand and flip up is at front foot strike. We want generally about 90-ish degrees. I believe ASMI has data out there that's like 80 to 110 degrees of abduction. So this would be 90, this would be a little lower, this would be a little more. In that 90-ish degrees range, and then in terms of flip up, it's a pretty big variability. I think it's like 27 to 84 degree range. So again, you have a lot of variability of where you want to be, but we don't want to be a late riser. So again, kind of going to thievery. On Base University, which I'll talk about a little bit, that's one of their terms where they talk about late risers, where the ball would be below the elbow at front foot contact. Early riser would be you've completely flipped up and gone past 90 or at 90 before foot strike. So we want to hold this because we want to use that stretch shortening cycle later in the layback.